Somewhere on this planet right now, it is so cold that your breath freezes before it reaches the air. A city exists where it rains so much that locals built their houses to be soundproof just to survive the noise. And there is a place where the ground itself has been on fire underground for decades, and people still live there, go to work, raise their children, and call it home. We are not talking about the cities you already know, not the ones that always show up on these lists, not the famous ones that everyone mentions when they think about extreme weather. Today we went further, we went off the map, and we found 5 places that most travelers have never even considered, cities and towns where the weather is not just extreme, it is almost unbelievable. Each one of these places will change the way you think about what human beings are capable of adapting to, and the last one on our list is a place where the weather does something so specific, so strange, that no other inhabited place on Earth can claim it. Stay until the end, and if you have never heard of any of these cities, drop a comment below, because that reaction is exactly what this channel is made for. Make sure you are subscribed. We cover a new city every single week. City 1, Yakutsk, Russia. There is a city in Siberia where the ground never thaws. Not in winter, not in spring, not even on the warmest summer days. The soil beneath Yakutsk has been permanently frozen for thousands of years, and the entire city sits on top of it, every building, every road, every pipe, and every foundation resting on ground that is technically ice. Yakutsk is the coldest major city on the planet, and it does not hold that title by a small margin. In January, the average temperature sits at around -37 degrees Celsius, and on the worst nights, which are not rare here, it drops to -60 degrees Celsius or lower. A temperature so extreme that human skin can suffer frostbite in under a minute of exposure, and car engines simply refuse to start unless they are kept running through the night. The city has over 370,000 residents, which makes it not just extreme but extraordinary. This is not a remote outpost or a research station, this is a real, functioning city with universities, theaters, shopping centers, and a population larger than many European capitals. But Yakutsk holds another secret that almost nobody talks about. Summer here reaches temperatures of nearly +38 degrees Celsius, meaning this single city experiences one of the widest temperature swings of any inhabited place on Earth, from brutal polar cold to genuine summer heat, sometimes within the same calendar year. The reason for all of this is geography. Yakutsk sits in a valley that traps cold air in winter with extraordinary efficiency, cut off from any warming ocean influence by thousands of kilometers of land in every direction, and the Siberian high, a massive high-pressure weather system, locks in the cold for months at a time. How do people actually live here? They wear layers of fur and insulated materials that take a long time to put on each morning. They heat their homes so intensely that stepping inside after being outdoors feels like walking into a different climate entirely. And most vehicles are left running overnight from October through April because starting a cold engine in those temperatures is simply not reliable. There is also something beautiful about Yakutsk in winter that photographs rarely capture, the phenomenon known as ice fog, when the air is so cold and so dry that moisture from human breath, from car exhausts, from any source of warmth, freezes instantly into a thick white mist that hangs over the entire city, turning streetlights into soft halos and making the whole place look like something from another world. Yakutsk is one of the most extreme places human beings have ever chosen to settle permanently, and the fact that it functions as a normal modern city makes it genuinely remarkable. City 2, Norilsk, Russia. If Yakutsk is extreme because of cold, Norilsk is extreme because of everything at once. Norilsk is the northernmost city on Earth with a permanent population of more than 150,000 people. It sits above the Arctic Circle, and it is surrounded by no roads, no highways, no train lines that connect it to the rest of Russia. The only ways in or out are by plane, or by river boat during the few months when the water is not frozen solid. Locals refer to the rest of Russia simply as the mainland, as if they live on a separate island. And in many ways, they do. Winter in Norilsk arrives in September and does not leave until May or even June. The city is covered in snow for approximately 270 days every year, and during the darkest part of winter, the sun does not rise above the horizon for 45 consecutive days. Residents live in complete polar night for over a month, navigating a city lit only by artificial light, with temperatures that regularly fall below -40 degrees Celsius and winds so fierce that the city's architects specifically designed the buildings to face each other and form walls against the gusts. Norilsk was built in 1935, and the history of how it came to exist is one of the darker chapters of the 20th century. The city was constructed almost entirely by prisoners of the Soviet Gulag system, forced laborers who worked in the permafrost in conditions that cost tens of thousands of lives. The mines they built, however, turned out to be sitting on one of the most valuable deposits of minerals ever discovered, rich in nickel, palladium, copper, and platinum, and today Norilsk produces around 20% of the world's nickel supply, making it one of the wealthiest industrial cities in Russia. That wealth comes with a price. Norilsk is also one of the most polluted cities on the planet. The emissions from the smelting industry have stripped the surrounding land of vegetation for miles in every direction, and the environmental footprint of the city is visible even from satellite imagery. And yet people live here by choice, drawn by high wages and a sense of belonging to a place unlike anywhere else on Earth. The city has a theater, a mosque that holds the Guinness record for being the northernmost in the world, public transportation that runs through blizzards without interruption, and a community of people who describe their home with a warmth that the temperatures outside seem designed to contradict. When summer finally arrives for its brief 2-month window, temperatures can reach 30 degrees Celsius, and the landscape transforms overnight into something almost surreal. Wildflowers bloom across the tundra in fast motion, the rivers unfreeze, and the same city that spent most of the year buried in snow is suddenly surrounded by one of the most beautiful raw wilderness areas on the planet, the Puturana Plateau, a UNESCO World Heritage Site of canyons, waterfalls, and silent Arctic rivers. Norilsk is not a place you visit casually. Foreign travelers require a special government permit, and independent travel is not permitted. But what it represents: a city built by force in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, now home to a generation that genuinely loves it, is a story that very few cities in the world can match. City 3, Mawsynram, India. There are places where it rains a lot, and then there is Mawsynram. This small town in the northeastern Indian state of Meghalaya holds the official Guinness World Record for the highest average annual rainfall on the planet. It receives approximately 11,872 millimeters of rain every single year, which means that in an average year, nearly 12 meters of water falls from the sky above this one place. To put that in context, most cities around the world receive less than a meter of annual rainfall. Mawsynram receives 12 times that. The reason for this extraordinary precipitation is geography. Mawsynram sits in the Khasi Hills at an altitude of around 1,400 meters, and it sits directly in the path of the monsoon winds that blow north from the Bay of Bengal. Those winds carry enormous amounts of moisture, and when they hit the Khasi Hills, they are forced upward, cool rapidly, and release their water in concentrated, relentless downpours that last for months. The monsoon season here runs from June to September, and during those months the rain is not simply heavy, it is constant. The sound of it on rooftops and roads is so loud that the local community long ago began building their homes with soundproofing made from natural materials just to sleep at night. Locals carry traditional full-body umbrellas woven from bamboo and banana leaves, a design specific to this region, built to protect not just from the rain but from the sideways wind that drives it. One of the most remarkable things about Mawsynram is that despite receiving more water than almost any place on Earth, the community has historically faced water shortages during the dry season. The paradox of living in the wettest place in the world and sometimes struggling to find clean drinking water says everything about the gap between precipitation and infrastructure. But what the rain creates is also extraordinary. The hills around Mawsynram are covered in some of the densest, most vivid green vegetation on the planet. Waterfalls appear on nearly every cliff face. Rivers run full and fast year-round, and the landscape has a quality of saturated color that photographs can only partially capture. The indigenous Khasi community that calls this place home has built a culture entirely shaped by water. They are a matrilineal society, meaning property and lineage pass through the mother. And their traditions include rain ceremonies and festivals that treat the monsoon not as a hardship but as a sacred and life-giving force. Perhaps the most quietly astonishing thing about Mawsynram is the living root bridges that grow in the surrounding hills. Local communities have spent generations training the roots of rubber trees to grow across rivers and streams, creating living bridges that become stronger with every passing year. Some of them now hundreds of years old and still in daily use. These bridges do not rot in the rain because they are alive, and the rain that would destroy a wooden or metal structure only helps them grow. Mawsynram is a place that redefines what rain means, not a problem to be avoided, but a force that built an entire civilization. City 4, Dalal, Ethiopia. Dalal is a place that feels as if the earth forgot to finish building it. Located in the Danakil Depression in northern Ethiopia, Dalal holds the record for the highest average annual temperature of any inhabited location ever recorded. The yearly average sits around 34 degrees Celsius, and during peak months temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius in the shade. The ground itself radiates heat, and the surrounding volcanic landscape means that the air carries sulfur, that the rocks come in colors that look chemically impossible, yellows and greens and reds that look like something from a laboratory rather than a natural landscape, and that hydrothermal vents release steam and toxic gases in quiet plumes across the terrain. The Danakil Depression sits at approximately 125 meters below sea level, making it one of the lowest points on the surface of the Earth, and the combination of low altitude, desert climate, volcanic heat, and minimal cloud cover creates temperatures that have pushed well above 50 degrees Celsius on recorded occasions. Almost no plant life grows here. The landscape is salt flats interrupted by volcanic craters, acid pools, and bright mineral formations that crust the ground in surreal geometric patterns. It looks less like a place on Earth and more like footage from a probe on another planet. And yet the Afar people have lived in and around this region for thousands of years. One of the oldest and most resilient communities in all of Africa, the Afar are semi-nomadic, deeply adapted to extreme heat, and have developed cultural and physical characteristics specific to surviving in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Historically, they were salt miners, extracting blocks of salt from the ground of the Danakil Depression and trading them across the region in camel caravans, a tradition that continues in parts of this area to this day. Dalal is technically a ghost town now, the remnants of a former mining settlement, but the surrounding area is inhabited, and the broader Danakil region draws a small number of travelers every year who come specifically to see what the planet looks like at its most raw. Tour groups move through quickly in the early morning hours before temperatures peak, and must carry all their own water because nothing drinkable exists naturally in this environment. Visiting Dalal is not casual tourism. It requires experienced local guides, significant preparation, and a clear understanding that the environment will actively resist your presence. Heat that high is not just uncomfortable, it is physiologically dangerous, and heat-related illness can develop faster here than almost anywhere else on Earth. But Dalal is also one of the most visually extraordinary places in existence, a landscape that seems to exist outside the normal rules of color and form, where the ground boils and steams and shimmers, and where the boundary between land and sky blurs in heat that bends the air into liquid shapes. It is extreme in a way that is almost impossible to describe without seeing it, and that is precisely why it belongs on this list. City 5, Longyearbyen, Norway. And now we arrive at the city that does something no other inhabited place on Earth can claim. Longyearbyen is the world's northernmost permanently inhabited town, located on the archipelago of Svalbard in the Arctic Ocean, roughly halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. Its population sits at around 2,500 people, and it functions as a real community with schools, a university, supermarkets, a hospital, and a cultural life that is surprisingly vibrant given that it sits at 78 degrees north latitude. The temperature in Longyearbyen rarely climbs above 10 degrees Celsius even in the warmest part of summer, and in winter it drops to around minus 20 degrees Celsius on average, with colder spells arriving regularly. But the temperature alone is not what makes this place extraordinary. What makes Longyearbyen unique is the light. For 4 months of every year, from late April to late August, the sun does not set. It circles the horizon continuously, 24 hours a day, day after day, 4 months, creating a phenomenon called polar day or the midnight sun. Residents sleep with blackout curtains because the distinction between day and night simply ceases to exist, and the psychological and physical effects of continuous sunlight are real and documented, disrupting sleep, mood, and the internal sense of time in ways that take considerable adjustment. Then, from late October to mid-February, the opposite happens. The sun does not rise at all for over 3 months. This is polar night, and it means that Longyearbyen exists in complete darkness for a period of time that, for most people in the world, is genuinely difficult to imagine. Not evening darkness, not short winter days, but total, persistent darkness from which no amount of waiting will produce a sunrise until the calendar allows it. The community has developed a relationship with light that shapes almost every aspect of daily life. There are festivals celebrating the return of the sun after polar night, public light installations throughout the town during the dark months, and a cultural awareness of how light and its absence affects human well-being that is more sophisticated here than anywhere else on Earth. There is something else about Longyearbyen that surprises almost everyone who learns it. It is illegal to die here, or more precisely, it has been since 1950. Because the permafrost prevents bodies from decomposing, meaning the town cannot support a traditional cemetery, anyone who is terminally ill must be transported back to the Norwegian mainland. The existing graves in the old cemetery date to the era before this rule existed, and they remain frozen in the ground, preserved by the same permafrost that makes so much of life in this place unusual. Polar bears outnumber people on the Svalbard archipelago. There are approximately 3,000 polar bears across the islands compared to around 2,500 human residents in Longyearbyen, and residents are required by law to carry protection when leaving the town boundaries. Climate change has made Longyearbyen one of the most closely watched places on Earth by researchers and scientists. The Arctic is warming at a rate roughly 4 times faster than the global average. And this small town sits at the center of one of the most significant environmental shifts in recorded history, a living laboratory for what the planet is becoming. And still, people choose to live here. They raise children in the dark. They celebrate the returning sun like a religious event. They carry rifles to check their mailbox. And they call this extraordinary, impossible, beautiful place home. 5 cities, 5 completely different versions of extreme. The world is much stranger, much more beautiful, and much more extreme than most of us will ever have the chance to see in person. That is why City Pulse exists, to bring those places to you, one city at a time. We will see you in the next one.